Welcome to the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. Today's episode marks a departure from the horror thriller Halloween-themed series we've been discussing of late. Rivals is a Disney show, but don't let that fool you. This British series is saucy. It's like The Gilded Age 100 years later with more sex. It's based on the book by Jilly Cooper. Tell me about the book.
Well, Jilly Cooper is 87 years old.
Oh my God.
She originally was a journalist in the late 1960s and then kind of turned to novel writing. And she is loved in England.
Oh, that's right, because she wrote this in 88.
Yes.
So she wasn't 86 when she wrote such a sexually graphic...
No, she's 87 right now. She's still alive.
Yes.
In fact, she even shows up in the series in episode 5, but that's kind of a different story. But yes, she wrote this Rutshire Chronicles, which is a series of 11 books that focus around, well, the genre is called bonkbuster. And you know what that is?
Like bonking as in having sex?
It's a subgenre of romance novels that kind of came out in the 70s and 80s that are also referred to as sex and shopping or shopping and fucking novels. In fact, the cast talked about how important it was, these sex scenes, of adapting it when they were making the TV series because of how much the book focuses on it.
Just because the book does, it doesn't mean the television series has to do it. But they do start the series with a sex scene in the bathroom of a plane.
And that's not in the book at all. That was actually added.
No one joins the Mile High Club in the book?
Yeah,
okay.
No. And there were no stunt doubles
and then they
used.
end the episode with almost all the main characters, except for the writer character, who I wonder if that was based on Jilly Cooper, because they do like writer jokes. You know how Stephen King writes writers into the novel, and sometimes it's him?
The only character I know for sure that was based on an actual person was actually Rupert Campbell Black. That's his name in the show. It's played by Alex Hassel. Yeah, he was based on Andrew Parker Bowles, the first husband of Queen Camilla.
Yeah, you're talking about, Camilla as in the person who married Prince, the king?
As in the Queen of the UK, yeah.
Yes, the king. I'm not British, but I know enough to know that. We talked about him in The Crown.
Yes.
Because at that point, he was meeting his other wife, Diana.
Yeah, and when Alex Hassel heard about that they were looking for people, because he wasn't actually really fit for the part, he asked for the audition himself, which is funny because, I mean, he's pretty well known as of now. He's been showing up in things like Cowboy Bebop and The Boys.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the people. So David Tennant is the main character, right?
Yes.
I've seen him play a doctor before, a lawyer, a detective, a serial killer, a Time Lord, a god himself. I'm big a David Tennant fan.
He has 5 shows in development, one of them being Daddy Beaver and a future series of Peppa Pig.
Okay. All right. Oh, yeah, he was also Scrooge McDuck, right?
Yes.
Because he also does voices.
DuckTales, yeah.
But I've never seen him play a television executive. So that's new for him. Though I would argue that most of his roles are in fact rivalries. What is Doctor Who if not just an unremitting supply of face-offs from the master? You just immediately agree.
No,
name all the rivalries then, because I've got them written down here.
Well,
who are all the people that face off against the Doctor?
Well, there's the Face of Bo, right? There's the Cybermen.
Yeah.
There's
the Face of Bo when Tennant was in it. I don't even think was a rival to him at that point.
He wasn't? I thought that he was a villain at some point. And then you also have the Dialects, obviously.
Yes, the Master, Cybermen, the Dialects, the Weeping Angels, the Governor. That's a David Morrissey reference. Other Doctors tend to be those rivals. And then in Staged, he's rivals with Michael Sheen.
Michael Sheen, yeah.
And in Good Omens, he's rivals with Michael Sheen.
In Jessica Jones, he's rivals with Jessica Jones.
And that's when he was playing a real villain in Jessica Jones. So, yeah, even more David Tennant roles I didn't even think about. But a busy synopsis of this episode is this. As far as I can tell, Lord Tony, David Tennant, has headhunted Declan O'Hara, who is this big-time reporter, interviewer at the BBC. He's not afraid to get in the nitty-gritty and go after politicians and make fun of them. And he has been headhunted to go work at Corinium. This is made-up television network, right? That Lord Tony owns. Lord Tony is super rich at this point, but it's new money that comes into play later. But in order to secure legitimacy for Corinium, this network, Tony is also forced to ask his rival, the guy you were just talking about, Rupert, a member of parliament that every woman seems to swoon for, for his blessing, for his endorsement, for him to join the board.
He's living the life, though, this Rupert character, right? Like, he's
it's
rich.
More just whenever he steps into a scene, back in the 90s or in Scrubs, whenever a hot girl would show up, they would always blow the air. They would make a point of like having every guy like jaw drop and everything. This is the opposite effect. I remember in we talked about Julie Bowen in the last episode
for Hysteria.
With Hysteria, and in her Modern Family role, her and her daughter, I think it was Haley, there was an episode where the firefighters were coming over and they immediately ran to like get all dressed up because they couldn't wait to see the firefighters come in. So it's like a woman's gaze. That's what this entire series is from. And so, yeah, Margaret Thatcher is the prime minister at the time, and her parliament is made up of Rupert Campbell Black. And he immediately tells Tony, go fuck yourself. Like, no, I'm not going to join your television network. I don't want you to succeed.
Right.
And in response, Tony outs his affair with another bigwig that's at his party at the time. And everybody's having sex with everyone, literally and figuratively. There's a lot of side stories going on. Cameron Cook is the sassy, snarky producer at Corinium who is having sex with Tony. Lizzie Veriker is the author we talked about, played by the IT crowd lady that hates her husband, who also happens to be rivals with Declan. It's okay if you get confused with all the names. I did too. Declan's marriage is a whole lot of mess. Like, his wife seems to be an actress, but she also loves to have affairs. And she also just is so snarky and rude to her daughter. They have 2 kids, one of which though is Agatha, and she's dyslexic, and she has a crush on, by the end of the episode, Rupert, but so does the mom. And so this very strange.
When they are describing the stories that this Rutshire Chronicles covers, it's adultery, illegitimate children, scandal, sometimes death even. And I know that Jilly Cooper, the writer of the novels, even when they came to her for some sex scenes, told them to cool off a little bit. She even had this quote, which I really love. In one episode, they have every member of the cast coupled and fornicating for the next 20 minutes and all of that.
She's like a grandma at this point. I feel bad for her. She's like, yes, when I was younger, I wrote some pretty erotic, crazy shit, but like now, no, thank you. She's getting a big check, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah, what else am I leaving out? Other TV executive-centric stories. The Loudest Voice was the Fox story, right, with Roger Ailes. Succession had Waystar, the fictional company run by Tom. Newsroom was all about the news network and trying to perform some legitimacy behind it. Who was behind that? That's the famous guy who did West Wing and all that stuff.
Aaron Sorkin.
And then Newsreaders, we talked about a few years ago. That was the Australian show, took place in the 70s or 80s. I think Yvonne Strahovski was in that.
So you've been mentioning all shows, at least with like Succession and Newsroom, that have gotten critical acclaim. Would you say that this is in the same vein as
You're trying to jump all the way to what I thought of it. What did I think? Okay, so it was cool to see the lady from the IT crowd. What's her name?
Catherine Parkinson.
And Being Human, the guy from Being Human.
Yes, okay, so you did recognize him.
I was able to once I clicked on his. I've seen him in a ton of stuff, but so IT crowd, Being Human, and Doctor Who with David Tennant. All of them, if you go back to 2010, they were leading their own British series.
Yes.
And now they're all together in one. That would have been a big deal if this had come out a few years earlier. This is a begrudgingly, to me, well-written series. It's got an unforgiving momentum in it. And you kind of do have to just put on the blinders with the sex scenes or with the nudity. And when you get beyond that, there does seem to be a fair bit of drama going on. And because the Britishness lends, I think, a little bit more credibility to, I guess, the poor writing. I feel like if this was an American adaptation, the dialogue would have been terrible.
So you think because it's British, it's like in a different tier, like it automatically gets.
You will need to use subs because they do have pretty strong accents, but it's cool to hear words like pinched, smashed, marmalade, things you wouldn't normally see. And then having it take place in the 80s, that's like the American 70s. They're usually like 10 years behind style-wise, costume-wise, and they're in the golden age of their TV, smoking everywhere, needle drops galore, like this pilot had so many music intros and famous songs. I think that's specific to the pilot to try to like encourage people to watch more of it.
Just going back to the smoking, I don't think that there's a scene that David Tennant has where he's not lighting up a cigar.
Yeah, I like it better than in Franchise where the guy's just vaping the whole time. Like, I don't know, there's something, I just want to grab the vape and like throw it away from people. The cigar I'm more used to, not for myself, but just seeing it on screen. The party scene is kind of where all the main characters come together and you see them interacting, and they do that in the first episode. I really like that.
That was the most Succession I feel like the show got. Because...
Game of Thrones too, in that first season, when they were all meeting in Westeros, I think it was the same deal. I almost forgot I was watching a pilot at that point. It was funny. There's an obsession with dogs, so you get a lot of dogs. There's an utterly passive aggressiveness between Maud and her adult daughter, which I ended up enjoying watching because it's like, who's going to get the win?
Right.
As I said, the female gaze, it's a little weird to get into because like at first you're just a little weirded out. It's overkill. It's every single dude that pops on screen. And then it's like, okay, what the fuck is going on? All right, fine. We're doing this. And then by the end, it's just kind of funny.
I mean,
any guy that doesn't have a paunch, you know, any dude that doesn't have a giant stomach is just looked at like, ooh, how can we fuck him?
I didn't get a lot on it, but I know that there were no stunt doubles used and Alex Hassel didn't wear a prosthetic. But going back to what you were talking about.
I did have to look away for that one because it was so egregious, like, right? Translucent, right? From The Boys. And so he goes from naked in that to naked in this.
And when you were talking about the comedy, it's weird because this has directors from all over. Elliot Hegarty, he's the one that directed the first 4 episodes, including this one. He's done episodes of The Middle, Ted Lasso, and Trying. That makes sense. But then you get into some weird directors like Dominic Treadwell Collins, who's an executive producer from EastEnder and writer for the series. And then you have D. Kopang O'Leary, who directed 2 of these episodes, and he's mostly directed for the past 10 years Victoria's Secret fashion TV specials. So it's just like they have people from all across the board.
It would be funny if he was only directing the sex scenes, you know? The last thing I'll say is that I liked how they brought in the Gilded Age, new money versus old money. Tony, he gets hit by Rupert a few times because Tony's like, our families go back. And then Rupert's like, not that long. And that was a really clever line because Tony is just insecure with the fact he wants to legitimize himself and his brand and his future, his kids and stuff by creating a dynasty of sorts. But he realizes that he's not respected by those other figures, not just because, it's just an interesting dynamic.
Everyone is villainous in this series, right?
No, I wouldn't say Declan is necessarily. I guess his relationship with his wife is pretty weird, especially in front of their kids when they just started getting it on. That was a bit much. But other than that, I think he's supposed to be the good guy.
But when it comes to Tony and Rupert, because that's kind of Tony versus
Tony's
Rupert.
A bad guy.
So who are you going for mostly?
David Tennant playing evil. That's one of my cons because I just don't enjoy it as much unless he's Killjoy. No, it's oh man, it just keeps going in and out. Kilgrave. His name is Kilgrave. Yes. I didn't have to look that up 100%. So no, I didn't.
No, I know.
So feels like Declan and Rupert are too similar. That was another one of my cons. Tony's brother is also very similar to Declan and Rupert. All the women want to sleep with these people. I don't think they do enough to explain why the network needs Declan. That's probably plot-wise my biggest concern for it is like, when we get these news type shows, the nice thing is we get to see fake shows. Sometimes we get to see them in action.
Well, the first scene we see with Declan is he's like tearing into a politician.
That's when he's on the BBC. But other than just telling Tony that he's out of money or that he needs more sponsorships, like we don't really get a reason why. And so I kind of wanted to see more of that. We did get one fake show, and that was one that they kept on throwing in, the Men Who Plow or whatever. And again, just another version of a bunch of dudes who are working off farm, and it's apparently very popular with the women there. Lots of interesting personalities. The cover of this thing doesn't strike me as one that's going to get a lot of attention. You go onto Disney Plus, it's not there. You have to type in the name, and then it pops up, and it just looks like this fussy Downton Abbey ripoff. And it makes me think not a lot of people are going to watch it. Now, in other countries, maybe it's being presented more like Citadel Diana, you told me it was very popular in Europe, but this, it just doesn't look like it was making the mainstream.
It has a fan base. I just don't think that, kind of like you're talking about, maybe in the US it's as big, because they did film it in like England, Hengrove, Bristol. So I think it's more kind of probably being advertised to them.
Do you agree that it was well written though?
Yeah, because the show has also gotten good reviews. I would say even critical acclaim. David Tennant even commented on the public reception of the series, calling it bananas. There are so many people that watched or binged the whole thing, and it ends with a cliffhanger. I won't say what, but it has gotten so many fans to write petitions, because it hasn't been renewed for a second season.
Oh, cool.
That people have taken a right into it. Taken a right into it. And The Guardian gave the series 5 out of 5 stars. It has a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, 88% audience score.
I was going to give it a 7, but then I had to take off 0.5 because it was just so lewd. Like,
so you gave it, so you're giving it 6.5.
Yeah, and I'm okay with sex scenes. It's just like, it was so in your face after a while, and it felt like this was the 3rd show in a row, or 3 out of the last 4, where we've watched it and it starts with a sex scene. You know, you have Disclaimer. That one had a long one at the very beginning. What was the other one that I'm thinking about? Hysteria? Yes. That starts sort of with a sex scene.
But you have to understand that with Jilly Cooper's novel, that's what the 11 books are about. That's the central theme. Like, even David Tennant suffered an injury while filming a sex scene. He smashed up his knee. That's like, I'm not sure if you can really dock the series for that, because that's what it's about.
When you said smashed up, I was starting to get a little, that was like, anyways, Tony, and the producer too was probably the weirdest one to me, because that producer, they really just made her snarky and snarky and sassy. And I feel like she really needs to be built upon, show some more character behind her. Everybody else, I feel like, was able to define themselves pretty well. I also really don't want to see Agatha's character and Rupert. There's too much of an age difference there, but it seems like that's where it was setting up, is that she's going to end up having sex with him at some point.
Well, the series is going to be 8 episodes. Are you going to watch the rest of it?
No, because the 6.5 isn't going to get me, but I wouldn't be against watching more of it. It's not one of those ones where I just would, it's not a 5 out of 10. It's not just down the middle. This is a better show than most. It's just not for a lot of audience. It's for a mature audience, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's kind of all I have, really.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. I think the next few we have are more Halloween centric. Yes. So like Uzumaki, and then Before. Is Before a horror series? I think
so, yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.